To conclude this demonstration of the word puzzle activity, I want to briefly discuss the rationale for each of the steps, because you as the teacher should understand not only how to do the steps, but why you are doing them. And in the course of this discussion, I'll highlight several special features of ABeCeDarian. Now, the organizing principle behind all the activities in the lesson, the starting point in designing the lessons, is identifying the skills and knowledge that a beginning reader needs to decode words. So let's go over those briefly. The first thing a beginning reader needs to know, to decode, is to know that the letters represent sounds. This isn't obvious. There are some languages, such as Chinese, that represent entire syllables rather than individual speech sounds with their characters. There are plenty of icons that the child recognizes from youth, such as the McDonald's icon or the Coca-Cola or Pepsi icons, which are graphic representations for entire words. So there are several other kinds of symbol systems besides a symbol system that represents individual speech sounds. So there's no particular reason why the new symbol system the student's learning as he learns to read has to represent speech sounds. That point has to be made explicit to her. In order to understand where the sounds come from, the student needs to be able to segment a word into individual sounds. Most of the words that we speak in regular speech and with which the child is familiar at the age of 5 or so are words that are composed of multiple sounds, such as mop and understand and refrigerator and so forth. The student, up until the time he begins formal reading instruction, pretty much has been taking individual sounds and putting them together, agglomerating them so that he could make words and longer sentences and so forth. But now, in order to understand letters, he actually has to analyze a syllable and take it apart into its individual speech sounds. This seems to be a skill that just about anybody with ordinary hearing and ordinary auditory processing is capable of doing, but it's not something that for most people develops automatically. In fact, many people in cultures that have no writing systems speak fine and have perfectly good hearing, but don't have the ability to isolate individual speech sounds, even though that ability remains latent within them and could be developed with the right kind of practice. This is all just a long way of saying students need explicit practice in order to develop this ability to segment words into individual speech sounds. In addition, students need to know which letters represent which sounds. So the first point here that I was making was just that letters represent sounds as a kind of general logical feature of how our spelling system's organized. This point has to do with phonics, that is, with letter-sound correspondences, to know, for instance, that this letter is p, and that this letter is m, and that this letter is ah. And finally, in order to be able to use this spelling system, even if the student knows that the letters represent sounds and can segment the word into individual sounds to know where the letters come from, and he knows his phonics, he knows what letters represent what sounds, in order to be able to utilize that, to be able to decode, a person needs to be able to blend isolated sounds into a word. I think, as I referred to it in an earlier part of the video, we have to put Humpty Dumpty back together again. So we have to know that mop is constructed out of the sounds ah, p. But also we have to understand that the individual sounds ah, p in that sequence represent the word mop. And I think you can see that all of these 4 main tasks, bits of knowledge and skill that a student has to have in order to do beginning reading are embedded within the word puzzle activity. For instance, the very first thing we ask the student is, what's the first sound in the word? We're giving them explicit idea that letters represent sounds. We've got our 3 lines, we've got the 3 letters. We're going to say what's the first sound in the word, and it's going to be represented by a letter. Lots and lots of explicit information to get to get across point number 1. Again, we want to help the student develop her ability to segment a word into sounds. That's exactly what we're doing at the beginning with all the supports of Turtle Talk, the 3 letters and the 3 letter tiles, and dragging your fingers slowly under the line. What's the first sound in mop? All the activities, all that part of the word puzzle is there to develop the ability to segment a word into individual sounds. You can also see that it's very clear we want the student to know which letters represent which sounds, and we make that crystal clear. There's no ambiguity about that. As we go through, we say which letter represents the sound. If the student doesn't know, we tell them. We just point to one letter, we touch it, we highlight it, we say the individual sound. When the whole word is constructed, we go through the letter sounds one at a time, and are very explicit about what sound goes with which letter. And then finally, we want the student to be able to blend the isolated sounds into word. And again, just like just like segmenting skill, blending is a skill that is not, for the most part, developed automatically in young people without some instruction and practice. And we're going to give them plenty of practice in the word puzzle by doing the tap and say activity. That is to say, getting used to hearing isolated sounds and connecting them with the entire syllable. I also wanted to point out some other important features of ABeCeDarian that will help you understand how the lessons are organized and some of the rationale behind it. One of them that's very important is that the lesson begins with the familiar. This is a general strategy you want to adopt in any lesson for a variety of reasons. In our case, the familiar is a familiar word. We're starting with a word that the student knows, mop. And we're going to do sat and tap and other very common words that the student's familiar with. So we're starting with something that's already in their experience, and then we're going to ask them to do something with it that's new, and we're going to be analyzing it. But we are starting with the familiar. This reduces anxiety, and it helps the student connect the new information and the new skills with something that's already there. It's very important to think of knowledge that we give to students and new skills that they develop as not something that is just kind of put into their brain, but integrated into what they already have up there. So beginning with the familiar really helps that integration process. It's also important to note that the lesson begins with letter sounds and not letter names, not letters. The first question, again, that we ask the student is, what is the first sound you hear in the word mop? The first thing that they do is say the word mop and start analyzing it. That is, we're talking about the sounds of the word, not the letters yet. The letters come second. This is an organizing principle that's utilized throughout ABeCeDarian. We begin with the sounds and then talk about the letters. Oral language, the sound part of the language, is primary. The written language is secondary. And this makes sense because that's the logic of the code. The code is a code for sounds. And before we talk about the code and the nature of the code, we have to make sure that in front and center of the student's mind is what it is that's being encoded. That is to say, letter sounds. And then one final feature that I want to emphasize is that the lesson begins with a task. We're going to spell a word. Help me spell the word. What's the first sound you hear? We're giving the student something to do right away. We're not beginning with an explanation or a presentation or even a demonstration. Now, these teaching techniques, explanation, presentation, and demonstration, have their place, but I suspect they're overutilized. And in general, it's a very good strategy to begin with a task because it gives the student something to do right away, and it has to do with, again, getting the new thing integrated with what the student already knows and can do. It also keeps them active and engaged. You don't have to say, now pay attention. You're very directive in what you're monitoring, and what you're asking them to do is a specific behavior. Please say the word, please spell the word with me, and so forth. And so they don't just hear a lot of blah, blah, blah. They get to do something and have a much better chance of understanding what it is you're doing and how it's organized when you're giving them a task rather than just talking to them about it. Now, in order to be able to do the word puzzle lesson really well, you'll have to get good at error correction. And there's a lot of support on ABeCeDarian to help you get good at error correction. The link on the screen right now is to a list which will give you a file that has a printout of a document that provides error correction information. It's called the ABeCeDarian Error Correction Guide, and it's the last element on the free support materials page on the main ABeCeDarian website. And there are also a number of videos on our YouTube channel that demonstrate how to do the error correction. It takes a lot of practice, but it's well worth it. Your lessons will move very smoothly, and your students won't get frustrated and learn very, very rapidly. Please write to us. Give us your questions, your comments, your concerns. We'd love to hear from you. You can join a Yahoo discussion group and contact us that way, or you can contact me directly at the email address on the screen. I think that's all for now. Look for some more videos demonstrating other aspects of the ABeCeDarian program. Happy teaching, everybody. Bye now.